So this week's project is a little bit of a bigger project. I'm going to do a whole kit. These 4 shells are Ludwig shells, all from the mid-60s. I sort of bought them individually, so they're not entirely matched, but they're all about the same. I've got a 12x8 here. I've got an old marching drum right here, a silver one. This has got no badge, but it's dated May 21st, 1966. Now I'm going to cut that one down and make that into a snare drum. That's received some damage. A lot of my snare shells like this have damage in the where the snare throw is. I've got a 14x14 floor tom shell, a club date shell. This one's got a badge on it, but no date inside. The badge reads 5518 something. I can't read it, but that's probably about 1967. And I've got this old marching bass drum, which is probably about 1968. It's the only one that isn't painted white inside. So I'm guessing that's probably about 1968. So we're looking all around about the same, within a couple of years of one another. They're all mahogany exterior ply and maple interior ply, as far as I know. It looks like it anyway. It's maple support hoops, 3-ply. Yeah. Now each one of these drums has got their own little problems and issues that need to be dealt with. So I'm going to take each drum individually and make a part of this restoration, make up 4 or 5 parts of this restoration. But today we're going to just start with the easiest drum, which is the 12x8, and I'm going to wrap this 12x8. They're all going to be wrapped in silver sparkle. So I'm going to start with this 12x8, and I'm going to do it in real time as well, so there's going to be no edits on this. We're just going to go straight through it, and I'll show you all the processes that you need to go through in order to do a project like this. So I'm going to get rid of all these drums apart from this one. Leave this one here. And start with this one. Right, okay, so this one has been through the walls a little bit, or has had quite a life. Somebody's had a go at painting it white inside. That's not the original white, that's a coat that's gone on over the top. The edges are a little bit rough, so I'll have to deal with that. And it's a little bit wobbly, so I'll have to deal with that as well. So I've prepped it a little bit for rewrapping. Mahogany outer ply. What I've done really is, when you take a finish off a Ludwig drum, there's a real risk that you're going to pull the mahogany outer ply away with the finish. This one's been really lucky, but there were a couple of little areas of one there where a little bit of ply came out. Nothing much really, so that was really lucky. All I've done is I've sanded the surface, make it nice and smooth. Got all the grit off. That's one thing you've got to do. And inside, I've just taped over the holes. A little bit of tape just fell off, so I'll stick that back on. That's to stop any glue from going inside the shell when you're wrapping it. Might put another bit on there. Right, so just put that to one side. Now, this is the silver sparkle finish. I've already cut this one. Now, when finish arrives, it arrives in a kind of a big roll, which often makes it a bit bendy. So I've just cut it and then wrapped it up in this roll the opposite way, so the bends come out. There we go. That's the finish. Now, all drums have a seam, and that's where most drum manufacturers start their wrap, just in there. that's where you line up to. So I'm just going to put this piece that I've already cut into position. I line up one end into that seam and then clip it. So you need a clip. Now the idea is to get this seam of the finish right slot bang into the holes, you know, aligned with the holes, so when you put the lugs on you can't see the finish, or you can't see as much of it as you could do if it was, say, in between the lugs. So once you've sized it, cut it, so it's all lined up, the next thing I do is just take the clip off for a second. Decide which end is going underneath. Take that end, just peel a bit of the plastic cover that it comes in, a protective cover, peel that back, not too much. I'd probably take 2 inches. It's got to be more than the overlap. Just cut that off. Should really get some new scissors, a little bit sharper. Right, that should be enough. That should be enough. Stick that bit down there. Get rid of that. Now, finishes are different in that they're different thicknesses. Now, some finishes are really forgiving when it comes to wrapping drums. Some of them are really thick, so you can get away with little imperfections in the shell. Other finishes are really thin. So the ones I've had trouble with are the oysters, black oyster, blue oyster, so on. And the worst one is got to be chrome. The worst one is just got to be chrome, because any little piece of grit, any dirt, anything that gets caught under the shell, even if you don't even see it, it'll protrude into the finish and make it just look like a bump. You know, when you're like wallpapering and a piece of dirt or something gets underneath the wall, you can see it, and it's just horrible, and it's never in a nice place either. So make sure the shell is nice and smooth if you're dealing with a thin wrap like chrome or black oyster. Silver sparkle, sort of like a mid thickness finish. So I've done what I needed to do on this. It's fairly smooth. Glass glitter is the most forgiving one. That's quite thick. Yeah, so be careful of that. Now I'm going to go back to the shell. Remember which is the underside of the overlap. Clip it in, and there you have it. Now for this part I'm just going to use another clip right here. Just clip the bottom end as well. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Next job, get some masking tape. Okay, and pull off a piece. Then stick it right where that seam is, so you know where to put the glue, how far you need to go up to the glue. Just going to move the clip a bit. Okay, so we've got that part sorted out there. Right, I'll take the bottom clip off. Right, so I'll just show you that. Now then, pencil. Very simple. Masking tape. Stick a piece of tape on the opposite side where your clip is. Okay. Mark it with a line, fairly thick, and then on the shell mark a corresponding line. Something that you can obviously see in pencil, so you can remove it later, but you've got to be able to obviously see it. Don't know if you can see that actually. I'll come around and show you. You see, two lines line up. Now that is more or less ready to wrap, ready to glue up anyway. One thing that you should do, while I think about it, although I'm not going to do it because I know this is fine, is put a head over the bare shell. So take this off. Put a head over the bare shell. Make sure the head fits on, because if it doesn't fit on, there's simply no point in going any further at this point. There's no point, because if that wrap is only going to make this drum wider, and if you can't get a head on it, there's no point. You won't even get a head on it. So now I've done other projects that you can see where I've dealt with little tricks in order to get around that. But for this one's okay, so we're just going to leave that for now. But it's worth checking. Now, for today's wrap, I'm going to use this. This is a spirit-based contact adhesive. Now, this isn't my first choice, I'll be honest. It's very difficult to work with it, but it's the most prevalent in the UK. You can get hold of this pretty much anywhere. I live in a village where there's only about 3 shops and I still managed to get this little tin. Evostick Impact. Not the easiest thing to work with, not my first choice, but it's worth getting to know how to use this, because it's easy to get hold of, and it does work well enough. I'll talk to you about what my first choices would be when I'm waiting for this to dry a little bit. So, first job is, let's get the tin off. This comes out like treacle, and it's a bit smelly, but you get an old credit card or membership card or somewhere, and you do the finish first. I'm just going to pour a bit on. Well, quite a bit. And spread it around. The trick is to get the thinnest layer possible on that you think you can get away with anyway, at least. And it's not great to use this one, but it does work. So I'm just going to do that. While I think about it, the most important part of this spreading out of glue is that you get the edges. Get right up into the edge, even if you have to go over the edge and get onto the table. Get right up into the edges. Now, a lot of guys use various different methods of sticking finish onto their drums. When I say guys, I mean boys and girls. One of them is sticky back tape. Sticky back tape is an absolute no-no. Never use it, don't like it, waste of time. And the reason it's a waste of time is because the finish isn't really stuck to the drum, which means that it can slip, and there's an awful lot of slippage on drums over years. They sort of contract and they can contract and expand, and you get kind of wrinkle effect if the tape isn't really holding. Premier in the 60s went through a period of time when they just used a bit of tape or a bit of glue. Really, it was just a bit of glue on the edges at the seams, and in the 70s I think as well. And I've had problems with those drums, old drums that I've used, in that you put them in a cold environment. You know, it doesn't have to be that cold. You know, like if you left them in your car overnight, for instance. I know that's a big no-no for expensive old drums, but if you did, or you have to work in a very hot environment, you can expect that to crack, expect the finish to crack. And a lot of those old Premier finishes are quite fragile, Ludwig's, on the other hand, I've hardly seen any serious major cracks in Ludwig's. I have seen a few major cracks, but they've been extremely abused. But Ludwig stuck the finish on the wood before it was even made into a drum, and you don't really see a lot of cracking in Ludwig finishes, as a general rule, compared to Premier finishes. Now I'm just finishing this off here. I'm just making sure I get all the edge. A nice thin, just a tad more. This is a messy job. It's a messy job. There is a theory that if you don't stick the finish to the drum properly, that in some way it will stop the drum from resonating properly. It acts like some kind of dampener. I don't know. I don't really think that would probably be the case, but don't use tape. Just don't use it. Don't use it. Stick the finish to the drum properly, and I think you'll have a far better result. So I'm really just making sure, because I'm doing this kind of live. I don't want to mess this one up. I'm not going to have any chance to make it any better. Just one last little bit. Okay, that's done. Put that to one side. Now that's dry. Now the good thing about these spirit-based glues is that they dry a lot quicker. With the water dispersed glue, you have to kind of wait for a good an hour. In fact, it doesn't really matter how long you wait, as long as it's over a certain period of time, which is about an hour. But the spirit-based glues, you have to kind of be quite sharp, really, after you've glued them. If you leave them for about an hour, you'll find they stop sticking. Well, in my experience, it had. And you'll get a bit of the shell, a bit of the finish that hasn't stuck to the shell. Just going to pour a bit. I know this is probably not the right idea. Pour a bit on. Again, although I'm putting this on quite liberally, you really want to make sure that the layer is actually quite thin, especially using thin finishes. Now I've really made a bit of a mess, and it's quite messy, this stuff. But it all comes off. It all comes off in the end. Now for very porous surfaces, now this is probably what I would consider to be pretty porous. You might need to put 2 layers on. In fact, I might do that. I know it's a bit of an extra time, but it might be worth it. I did a snare drum recently and I put 2 layers on. I was very happy with the result. Again, edges, really important to get the edges. The other thing about this spirit contact is that if you buy a tin, expect to use it within a few days once you've opened it, because after that it starts turning into a nasty mess, and it's hard enough now to apply it. I couldn't apply this with a brush or a roller, which is probably the best way of being able to use it. It's just too thick. It's too thick. But any contact adhesive that's better than this one is actually quite hard to get in the UK. So this masking tape came off. It's not the end of the world if the masking tape comes off. That was probably the bit that fell off earlier. stick it on. I know this is time consuming, not very interesting to watch. At least you know I'm not pulling any punches. Last little bit. Yeah, after a few days, this spirit-based gum glue it's just hard to work with. It's just hard to work with. It's only really good when it comes straight fresh out of the tin, out of a new tin. So really, sort of don't buy one, do a snare drum, and then leave it in the cupboard sitting around to coagulate and turn into a very nasty, difficult to use mess. Right, that's one layer, one coat. Now I'm going to take a risk because this is going to take time to dry. A thin layer. Try to get any little obvious lumps of the glue. I just missed a bit there. Obviously, if you have a great big lump of glue, that's going to start looking odd through the finish. But at the same time, make sure you've got a good covering. Right, I'm going to leave that to dry off now, which is the top. Right. Right, I'm going to just leave that there, which is the top. That piece of masking tape that came off is my marker. But that's okay. That's okay, because I'll just stick another piece on. Oh no, it's not my marker. No, forget what I just said. But while I'm at it, I'm going to stick this on. In the holes. See? Just stop any more glue just dripping through. Right, okay, so that's that sorted out. Right, so while I'm just letting that dry, now it takes only a few minutes to dry, I'm just going to deal with this glue. Now this is the glue. I'll just give you another little look. Evostick Impact. Now the best glue is a 3M product called Fast Bond 30NF. It's a water dispersed glue, contact adhesive, that kind of looks like a milky solution. Very, very easy to use. Very, very easy to use. Use a roller for that, or a brush. Roller or a brush for that, and it's zero mess, and any mess that you do get created can just be wiped down while it's wet. Obviously, if you get it on your clothes, you might as well just throw your clothes in the bin. Your brush will be knackered at the end of it, and your roller, so forget that. But it's very, very easy to apply. You just apply it like paint, and you let that dry. It takes quite a long time to dry. It takes about an hour, maybe more, depending on how much you put on. But it's the most the easiest one to get a really good finish on. It doesn't have any bumps or lumps in it. It really adheres well to the finish and to the shell. I have virtually had no problems with it at all. I have more problems with this one. So that's probably my recommendation. But because this one is so common, that I had to learn how to use that one as well. So I'm just going to go and get some white spirit so that I can just clean up this little bit of mess here. Bit of white spirit, just clean up your mess while waiting for that to dry. Always a good idea. it's always a good idea to clean up any contact adhesive while it's kind of still a bit dry, still a bit wet. Once it dries, it's just a whole lot harder to remove. Make sure that when you have cleaned down, there's no little bits of glue hanging around on your surface that could get caught underneath the wrap. Again, we're trying to get the best finish as we possibly can. Okay, nearly there. Now this finish is still a little bit wet. This glue is still a bit wet. It doesn't have to be completely dry. But it has to be tacky. I'm going to see what it's like to wrap a drum when it's still a bit tacky. This is probably a little less time than I would really want. But let's give it a go. It's only a drum. Remember, it's only a drum. Nobody's going to die doing this. Okay. The most important thing to do when you wrap is make sure that the finish is nice and straight. Nice and straight like that. Okay? Might help just to be able to stand it up. You bring the drum to the finish, not the other way around. Bring the drum to the finish. Just quickly check there's nothing sticking on the shell. Okay, looks fairly clear to me. Right, bring the drum to the finish. Now that mark we made earlier and the mark on the drum have to be smack on together. This is the side that goes underneath. So I'm going to do that side first. Just quickly with your finger, I'm just going to quickly stick that bit there. Now that's stuck all right. Now, old cloth, old pair of underpants, whatever. Something like this. Now, how am I going to do this? I'm going to move it around a little bit, just a little bit, so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to get this and just going to rub down the side and push it round gently. Now be careful of that, of it flipping round, because that can end up sticking where it's not meant to stick. Gently move it around so that you can keep an eye on what's going on. Make sure it's pressed down firmly at the bottom as well as the top. And keep going round. Make sure that you're not creating any sort of areas in the finish that aren't stuck down. Okay, that's the first side down. I'm just going to press that down. Now, those of you who've been watching carefully will know that I haven't glued this. This over part first, this bit that connects with the other side of the finish. Now, the reason I don't do that is because I like to do one side of the finish at a time. I like to just put the finish on, glue the finish on the underside, and then leave that to dry, because it's just a fiddle trying to turn it around and get the glue on. So I leave that bit till last, even if I have to wait a little bit longer to do it. There's no rush. Now I'm going to do the other side. Push this one round. So it's like that. You can see that. So it's not quite connected. There's a little bit of a space there. Now you could put a little bit of a spacer in there if you wanted to. I'm not going to bother because I haven't got one here. Go back to the glue. Now I'm going to put the finish, put the bit of glue on the underside of the finish. And this is what the masking tape was for. So put a little bit in there. Don't go onto this side of the masking tape, don't go onto this side of the masking tape. Keep it onto the masking tape, just go underneath there. So I don't know if you can see, but I've just glued this side of the finish and not this side. And gone onto the masking tape. Make sure you do the whole thing all the way down. Just leave that to dry for a little second. So, while waiting for that to dry, I'm just going to tell you what else I need to do to this drum. Now, the edges are quite rough, and normally if I thought the edges were fine, I would probably paint this before doing the wrap, but it's not. It's not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just finish this wrap and cut the edges of the finish. And then I'm going to get a board and stick some sandpaper on it and spin the drum on that sandpaper, so you'll get a nice flat even edge. Do it on both sides, and then by hand I'm going to cut the edge again so it's nice and flat, doesn't have any problems with tuning, and it'll be a lot easier to use. Now I might, in fact I probably will, also have to cut the inside of the support hoop, you know, the bit that meets up with the bearing edge, because if I spin this on a surface it's going to go very flat even on the support hoop. So that will have to be cut as well. But I'm going to show you all how to do that. It's very simple, it just needs patience and a good eye. Now I'm hoping that that glue is now pretty tacky. First thing that I'm going to do is take off the masking tape. Okay. Now you're going to have to forgive me if this doesn't quite stick, because I don't think it will straight away. I would probably leave this, ideally I'd like to leave this for another 5 or 10 minutes, but that won't make very good video. So wish me luck. Okay. Carry on what we were doing before, just press down. Actually, what you could do now is just make sure that the finish is adhered properly to the other side. Which it has, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. The reason why, I'm not going to press it down, the reason why that you have to do it absolutely flat, horizontal, like that, not like that, or like that, that would be a real problem, because as you're putting it around the drum, the finish, this end will come up and this one will go down, so it gets like a corkscrew effect. So you'll have a great big gap at the seam here where there's no finish, and loads more finish down here, and similarly you have a gap there and loads more finish up here. So whenever you wrap, make sure that the finish is absolutely horizontal. That's why we laid it on the surface and stood it up. Okay. I'm hoping this is going to work. Well, it's all right. It's stuck. Apart from a little bit at the bottom. I'm just going to put my finger on that. So there you go. That's how the shell gets wrapped using spirit-based gum, and that's how much time. Ideally, that was probably leaving the glue to dry was probably a bit short, but that's how you do it anyway. Now the next stage is something that I'm going to do in another video, because I have to wait for this glue to finish before I can do any of the cutting of the finish, the edges of the finish, and the drilling of the holes.